I'm going to get to a couple of listener questions here to end the program, and I appreciate it. Poop, the Woodsman is here, as well as at Bengals_guy on Twitter, kind of had some questions on the outlook of the Bengals pick at number 12. And I think this is a good segue from what we were talking about identity. Now, I think obviously cornerback, I think running back, I think, I won't say that, but I think cornerback, running back, and maybe defensive end. I think those are kind of off the table at number 12. I wonder what the Bengals are going to do about offensive tackle, because I still think they can mine some talent out of Jake Fisher, and I still think that they can get something out of Cedric Ogbuehi. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, but I think that that's their mindset. At number 12, as we sit here in January without the combine happening, without free agency and all that stuff, I'd like to see potentially Roquan Smith, the linebacker out of Georgia, if he's there. I think that would be a phenomenal pick as you pair him to Vontaze Burfict in that defense. I think that would just, especially with how diminished that linebacker group got with injuries and all of that. I think that would be a great pick if he is there. And, there was talk about Reuben Foster last year, who was there when the Bengals were picking, but whoever made the call went with John Ross, and Reuben Foster fell all the way towards the back end of the first round to San Francisco. And, a lot of people think that, Reuben Foster would have been a great fit next to Vontaze Burfict. And even if Vontaze Burfict was out of the lineup, at least the Bengals would have had a playmaking type of linebacker in the lineup with him out of the lineup. So I think that's when I think offensive lineman. You can think of, I believe it's Connor Williams out of Texas, Mike McGlinchey out of Notre Dame. Those are guys that are kicked around, and I would not be opposed to that. But I think you kind of have to get to the meat and potatoes of this roster. I think you've got the flash on the outside. You've got, as we mentioned on this program, Green, Ross, Boyd, LaFell. I don't know what they're going to do with Eifert, but they've got that. They've got Mixon. They've got Bernard. Don't know what's happening with Hill. They've got the flash on offense, and they've got Carl Lawson, a guy who's bidding for Defensive Rookie of the Year. They've got Carlos Dunlap. They've got Michael Johnson. They've got Geno Atkins. I think you got to get those meat and potatoes type of guys. Maybe they're not going to excite a lot of fans in terms of who is picked and the position that is picked, but I think that that's what this roster needs. It needs linebackers. It needs offensive linemen, potentially safeties. Tight ends are a sneaky little need, as are potentially a third running back if the Bengals want to go that way. But I think if you load up on offensive line, if you load up at linebacker, I don't think you can go wrong, especially when we're talking about working in the AFC North. So thank you to at Bengals_guy and Poop, the Woodsman is here in the YouTube chat. There's one from Michael Myers. I'm going to leave it open-ended. I got an email saying, Lewis staying essentially is trying his fandom, and I do want to say this because, I want to pat myself on the back. Michael Myers, who is always on this on our live preview, says that he thanks for taking the time every week to do the show. Been a fan for over 30 years. I followed the Bengals, and after this week, I just can't take it anymore. As I said, I wanted to take a moment to thank you for your show. It's been fun tuning in every week to talk Bengals football. Thank you, Michael. I see you every week, and I've joked a little bit about your name for the Halloween horror movies, but you've been a great contributor to this program, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the positive feedback you've given Scott and I want to acknowledge that. But your talk about, potentially Lewis questioning your fandom or Lewis coming back questioning your fandom. I don't. To me, I hate to say this, but to me, I've been a bit numb ever since that 2015 wild card game. What has transpired since, I've been like, yeah, that's the Bengals. Yeah, that's what they do. Oh yeah, they let him go. Or yeah, I hate to say that, but I'm not surprised based on, and I'm 35 years old. I've been a fan since 1988, that Super Bowl. So I've been a fan since I was a very young kid as well. So I've seen a lot of stuff, and I've seen this team struggle. I've seen them do well. That 2015 wild card game, that one rates up there with the Carson Palmer knee injury in 2005. That one really stuck with me, and I'm still going to stick with this team. I'm still passionate about them, but I do need to, like I think many fans are, I do need to see changes. I do need to see operational changes. Now, Marvin Lewis is back. That's not a change. Are they going to be more aggressive in free agency? That would be a big change. Are they going to, we talked about Anthony Munoz earlier in this show, a guy, nobody on the Bengals team should ever wear 78 ever. And are they gonna do a Hall of Fame, a Hall of Champions? That would be a great thing to extend to the fans, even though they haven't won a Super Bowl or anything like that. That would be something that I would think they should do. They've not done it. Are they going to build an indoor practice facility? There's no indication of that. There are things. I hate to, it's not. I almost am hesitant to say it, but it's almost like you're in a one-sided relationship with somebody where you love them, you see the good in them, you see certain aspects of things with them that, that's what I love about them. Yet it's not always reciprocated, and or it's rarely reciprocated. And the Bengals, they're fun at times. They tease you when they go to the postseason. I'd like to see them do things differently. And for those of you who have either been involved in nonprofits, charities, businesses, schools, whatever, you see shortcomings in terms of how those organizations are run. Yet, you also, if you've been involved in a family-owned operation, you have seen what that can do. And unfortunately, the Bengals, like it or not, and however they want to mask it, they are a family-owned operation. And that is what it is. So I'm leaving this open-ended. I'm still a fan. My fandom has been greatly tested. Trust me. And I've had my struggles with still rooting for them, especially these past 2 years since that wild card game. But I want to leave it to you guys, and I'll let you guys talk about it. But it's a valid question of, is your fandom tested since Marvin Lewis is now returning for the next 2 years? And we'll see. There's talk of Terrell Austin, a gentleman who might be the coach in waiting under Marvin Lewis. That was kind of a plan with Hugh Jackson, but we'll see. But a great question, and thank you for the support, Michael Myers. Appreciate it, my friend. Let's kind of get to a couple others here. There is one from Teresa Krieger I saw, or Krieger. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but something about the effect of Pac-Man's role in 2018, especially with, I think this is a great question, with William Jackson on the roster, who, by the way, in case you don't follow Pro Football Focus, I know there's flaws and whatever else you want to talk about, but if you know, he's one of the best graded cornerbacks in 2017 in their metrics in terms of completion percentage, his way, passes deflected, all of that stuff. He has been amazing against Antonio Brown, by the way. So there's him. There's Darqueze Dennard, who is in, he's going to be in the final year of his contract. Obviously, there's Drake Kirkpatrick, who they re-signed, and a new defensive coordinator. What's the deal? To channel my Jerry Seinfeld, what's the deal with Pac-Man Jones? I honestly do not know. I would like to think that William Jackson should be the starter on this team, a cornerback. And I think, based on Pro Football Focus's metrics and everything else, I think he is the best cornerback that they have. Speed, ability to knock away the ball, athleticism, big playability. I really like this kid. And I liked him a lot coming out of the draft a couple of years ago. I didn't necessarily – I did pick him to the Bengals, but it was a second-round pick. But I did pick him to the Bengals in one of my mock drafts. But I don't know if I like him, if I liked him at the time, given that they had so many first-round picks on the team. But at cornerback. But he has proven, at least in his first year of being getting extensive playing time, he has proven to be their best and most reliable cornerback. I think, without a doubt, he should play next year. Now, if Marvin Lewis truly is sticking to his word, and if he is hiring guys that is playing to that philosophy, Terrell Austin, if you've seen some quotes from him, he's saying, I'm going to mold the defense around who I've got. I'm going to play, kind of the best guys, that sort of thing. I think, especially the Lions defense, who was so great at creating turnovers and all that, I think that Jackson needs to be on the field often, starting in 2018. And this is the thing that, we can sit here and we can criticize, there's not a change of head coach, there's not a change at certain areas, that sort of thing. Perhaps the philosophy change is the thing that's needed with the Bengals. And perhaps part of that philosophy change is letting the young guys play over some tried and true veterans that Marvin Lewis likes, that Mike Brown likes, and that need to get on the field. To me, if you were to ask, based on what I saw last year, based on Pac-Man Jones's age and all of that, there is no doubt that William Jackson should be starting at cornerback over Adam Jones. And to be honest with you, the best two cornerbacks last year were William Jackson and Darqueze Dennard, not Drake Kirkpatrick and not Adam Jones. Now, Adam Jones was hurt, and ended up on IR. I get that, but I kind of see, and I've said this before on this program, I kind of see a Leon Hall, Darqueze Dennard, and Jonathan Joseph, William Jackson, type of dynamic with those two guys. And I think that they need to roll with that. That doesn't mean they need to get rid of Drake Kirkpatrick. That doesn't mean they need to get rid of Adam Jones. But I think that those guys need to start taking a back seat. I think that if the Bengals, I will say this, Adam Jones is making quite a bit of money for a cornerback who is approaching his mid-30s. So I think that if they are going to do more in free agency, if they are going to change who they are, quote unquote, I think that he might be someone who could be on the chopping block and could free up some space for them. I don't know that they're going to do that, but I don't necessarily want to see that, because Adam Jones provides some big playability at corner, provides some big playability on special teams, but I just think it's at some point you got to move on, and you've got to play these young guys. Carl Lawson is a prime example of playing young guys over other players. You have to do that. We are going to get out of here in just a minute. Thank you for all of your questions so far tonight. I got one last week, and unfortunately I didn't get to it on last week's episode. It was from Max Meehan, and it has to do with Marvin Lewis and Paul Alexander leaving the Cincinnati Bengals. And if that means that Lewis has wrestled some sort of form of power from Mike Brown and all of that. We do not, I don't know. I cover the Bengals. I kind of hear news through the grapevine and all that stuff, and I pride myself on kind of knowing a lot of things about the Bengals, especially as they break. None of us can really know the dynamic and the relationship between Marvin Lewis and Mike Brown, except for those two gentlemen. I don't know. And I've met both of them in person, not together, but I've met both of them in person. I've talked to both of them somewhat extensively. I don't know the extent of their relationship. My guess is there is a significant amount of trust between Mike Brown and Marvin Lewis, and that's kind of how it is, and that's why he has been retained for what is going to be now 17 years. But Paul Alexander has always been a Mike Brown guy. He started as a tight ends coach, moved himself into the offensive line coach, and has coached with the Bengals since 1994. I've said on this program before, I know a college football offensive coordinator. He's at a minor program, but he knows Paul Alexander and attends Paul Alexander's yearly, it's a symposium of some sort of coaching and offensive line coaching and kind of an educational type of seminar, if you will, that Paul Alexander puts on, both that he speaks at and other coaches speak at. And he is a very well-respected guy in the business. I'm going to say that. And I know a lot of people have their own thoughts about Paul Alexander, but that's the truth. I've heard it. I think that, yes, it was beyond time to move on from Paul Alexander. Does that mean that Lewis went into Mike Brown's office and said, "Hey, if you want me, you gotta let Paul Alexander walk"? I don't think that's the case. And I don't necessarily think that that's what Marvin Lewis specifically asked for. I think that this is something that, hey, we have to have a consistent message in the team. And I think that's why you see Bill Lazor, a guy he worked with Bill Bicknell, working under him with the receivers, guys that know each other well. And that's why you see Terrell Austin being the defensive coordinator, and Kevin Coyle, a guy who has been in and out of the Bengals coaching lineup. He's now gone. There's this trickle-down effect. And, Mike Brown can talk about continuity all he wants, and he can look at the Steelers and other teams as the beacon of, this is who we want to be. This is why we're sticking with Marvin Lewis and all of that. But if you have certain figureheads that are there and other guys that kind of come and go, or if you have a head coach and he's not on the same page as the defensive coordinator or the offensive line coach, and you have to remember that Paul Alexander wasn't just the offensive line coach, he was the assistant head coach. So you have to imagine he still had quite a bit of say, both in the draft room and personnel and just kind of all around how the team was formed. So I think at that point, I don't want to say that Marvin Lewis pushed Paul Alexander out the door or said, we're not going to rehire this guy. But I think that it's kind of what I think there's probably some things that happened that happened in 2011, which was, if you want things to kind of turn the corner again, we need some change. Things have gotten stale. Now, of course, everybody's going to argue that Marvin Lewis has gotten stale. I've argued that. But I'm not the one in charge of the Bengals, so Marvin Lewis is staying. So what he's going to do, and I saw someone earlier in the YouTube chat talk about, like, Marvin, Marvin was great when he had great coordinators and great coaches under him. I completely agree with that. And I think that that's probably what Marvin is trying to do. And I think that Marvin is a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach. And I'm on record for saying that. I think he's a great man. I think he's done great things for Cincinnati. I think he's a good coach, good football coach. I do not think he's a great coach. And I think what propels him to some of these great years is the coaches under him and or healthy rosters and great drafts that have supplemented those rosters. So I think that's probably the proposition that he gave Marvin Lewis in terms of, to answer those questions. I think that's probably the proposition he gave Mike Brown when Mike Brown said, look, fans may not want you back, but I want you back. And I think Marvin wanted to be back, obviously, otherwise he wouldn't have signed the contract. But I think it's, we got to get, if you look at the age group of this coaching staff, it's relatively young. So we probably got to get younger and more fiery at the coaching ranks. We got to do more in free agency. We got to do more in the draft. And we have to commit, I'm sure there's more logistics that Marvin laid out, but that's my thinking of how this entire thing played out, including what happened to Paul Alexander. I have a lot of respect for Paul Alexander, but as I've said on this program, Paul Alexander is a guy who is a fine tuner of guys who have been first-round picks, second-round picks, high picks, and he hasn't done so with Cedric Ogbuehi and Jake Fisher. And when it comes to interior linemen, he plays favoritism to a fault. And there are players who have sat on the bench behind certain players that, just have not played and should have played. So that's my thought on it. I don't want to say Marvin Lewis has shoved people out the door, shoved coaches out the door, but I think he has kind of said to Mike Brown, let's hit the reset button in a way on the coaching staff. Let's hit the reset button in a way of how we operate. That doesn't mean let's be in salary cap hell. That doesn't mean let's get crazy in the draft, but let's do some things. Let's replenish the roster. Let's get younger and more fiery in the coaching staff. He's going to lean on some of these guys on the coaching staff to, I don't want to say do his job, but he's going to lean on them. And, he's done that before with Jay Gruden, Mike Zimmer, with Hugh Jackson, with Paul Gunther. He's done it before. We've seen it. I mean, it's the reality. So that's what I think. If you don't agree, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate all of the questions. Appreciate all of the live listeners. You can get in touch with the program on via Twitter at BengalsOBI or via email, the obinsider@gmail.com. You can also get the program on CincyJungle.com, on iTunes, on SoundCloud, and YouTube. Subscribe to us. Appreciate all the support. Appreciate you guys tuning in live.